I'm not hearing everybody. So I always wanted the opportunity when I come on the stage to make a national greeting. Just so you know, sometimes as an MC, you go on the stage and you hear that echo, especially when you got Farley Hill. You say, hey, hey, hey. So I can try it. Good evening, Barbados. Yeah, that is it. So welcome once again to our annual Labor Day. This is a day not just for those who are old in age or mature in age or those who have experience within our workforce, but this is a day to celebrate labor throughout the entire country. Those in our youth, those in our seniors, those who've gone before us and paved the way that we can have a day such as this, that we can celebrate, that we can mix and mingle with our comrades and our other fellow workers. We have the opportunity today to meet some old friends, some old flams, some that you can't even explain to your husband standing next to you how you know him or her. But we are here to enjoy this day. We are here to celebrate the Workers' Day. So I want you to put your hands together and give yourselves a round of applause for the hard work that you have been doing in the development of the Barbadian society. So ladies and gentlemen, fellow comrades, family, I am Shakita Williams and I will be your MC for part of this evening's proceedings. So as we're going to get right into the meat of the matter, I want to introduce to you one of the most vibrant members within the Barbados Workers Union organization. This is a young man who has really shown me what it means to be a true leader. One who has invested a lot of time in the development of the Barbados Workers Union Youth Arm. A young man who believes in the trade union movement in Barbados. This is a young man who is often known within the DJ arena as AA. Sometimes I call him the Duracell AAA battery. But this is one who was on fire, who has a zeal for the trade union movement. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Akil Aline, who is the president of the Barbados Workers Union Youth Arm. Put your hands together and welcome him as he comes.
Over 50 years ago, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, better known as Mahatma Gandhi, said, and I quote, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world. You must be the change you wish to see in the world." Madam Prime Minister, Master of Ceremonies, Madam General Secretary, and members of the Executive of the Barbados Workers Union, leaders of our sister unions, specially invited guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As was hinted at just now, I am Akil Aline, president of the youth arm of the Barbados Workers Union. And today, I greet you in the name of all workers, but especially those who are now making a way for themselves. Today is a special day. A day for workers, a day for labor, and a day for us to come together in solidarity and in celebration of growth and progress. Never mind those who may say this is a bank holiday and a wasted day where money is lost. No, today is a day for us. The youth arm of the Barbados Workers Union plays a key role in energizing and educating young workers to be the change that Gandhi spoke about. We recognize that the labor movement needs to have strong, ambitious persons who are motivated to achieve, produce, and to reach their goals. These goals go beyond simply attaining promotion or status. They also include uniting for the good of the union and for the good of the country, representing each other when needed and standing firm in the face of challenges. Some of these challenges would have been mentioned by many speakers in the past, but as youth, I believe that we face an even greater challenge from day to day. More and more of our young people are losing faith in the relevance of the trade union movement. It's true. We live in a media-driven, ready-then world where the focus always seems to be, what is in it for me? I say it to all of you today, young, and yes, young at heart. This is not the mindset to have. It must not always be only what is in it for me, but what is in it for us. Us, the young people who need to recognize our roles as future leaders in society and use each day and moment to better ourselves for the task ahead. Us, the unions who are major stakeholders in the growth of this beautiful island we call home. Us, the people who make up this village called Barbados and who overcome all obstacles, no matter how tall, no matter how wide. We, by our actions, determine our future, and therefore we have to be the best that we can be. Now this is important, since, as we all know, our youth and young workers need to be motivated and inspired if they are to shape the future. The motto of the Youth Farm says that we are the future. Let us make our mark. And so I ask all of us today, what future do we want? Do we want a future where our young people are not interested and do not reach their potential? Do we want a future where we refuse to take responsibility for our actions and simply blame other people? Or do we want a future where our young people shine, where they grab opportunities and create positive, progressive paths that lead them to their goals and help to drive the engines of our society? I think you would agree that that last option is the only choice. But if we are to get there, all the persons in our society and leadership must continue to be good role models and set examples. Our leaders must not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. And all of us must see the part we place in raising up a child in the way he or she must go. Now, just recently, in the ever-popular TV series called Game of Thrones, amidst all of the action and all of the drama, I believe there is one thing that should be highlighted. The character who delivered the blow to end the war. The character who delivered the blow to end the war was probably one of the youngest of the main characters, if not the youngest, in the series. Today, she's seen by many viewers as a hero and as a savior. Throughout the entire series, this young girl was faced with countless obstacles, but she never gave up. She survived and she overcame all of them. Because through it all, she had the assistance of other people. Through it all, she was protected. Through it all, she was mentored. She was guided. She was groomed to overcome the adversity. And even at the end, when it appeared that all hope was lost with the war, she received that extra motivation from an elder when she was reminded of her teachings to tell the enemy, not today. Comrades, I say all that to say this. The problems plaguing our society today are not battles only for our young people, but for us to win as a society, it must be a collective effort. We as young people, we need you. Some of us may refuse to admit, but the truth is, we need each other. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much more. And so, to the members of the unions, I say, continue to represent and support your union as it continues to grow and represent your interests. To our young people, I say, continue to let your light shine, participate, get involved, and make a difference through your words. Make a difference through your actions and your ideas. Be that change which you wish to see. And to all of you here before me, may you continue to enjoy this blessed and hallowed May Day, and may we all continue to make our mark as we head towards a glorious future. Master Sermons.
Thank you, Akil. It is always good when we see our young people not only behind the scenes but center stage doing great things for our communities. This is not a young man who is just one of our budding delegates, but he's also a Toastmaster. So I want us to give him another round of applause for his efforts. Akil pleaded that we in the Barbados community ought to be our brother's keeper. Something that I believe that some of us may have forgotten along the way. But we always have to remember that family is the greatest thing. Amongst all things, amidst all the adversity that may be going on within our country, if there's violence, if there's disparity amongst our brothers and sisters in other communities, we always must remember that we ought to stick together. They said that Barbados is the being, the sun that shines amongst all things, and we ought to remind people of that. There's a special lady here amongst all special ladies that are in the audience this afternoon. One who doesn't know, but I nicknamed this person Clean Sweep. When the person comes, you would understand why I nicknamed the person Clean Sweep. There's a little joke in our home up in St. Peter. This is a lady who is also known as Thunder. One who stood out in their party for the labor movement years ago. Some may say before it was even conceived or thought about. This is a woman of power. This is a woman who robbed me though. I remember when I was a little lad at the St. James Secondary School, newly named the Frederick Smith School. And I entered the speech competition. And in my speech, it was entitled, "This is my school." And I said in that speech, and I remember walking to the side of the podium like they teach you in public speaking. And I said, I would one day look into the cameras, and I'm glad that CBC is here to hear this. And I will say, I will become the first female prime minister of our beautiful island, Barbados. And my family was rooting for me. They said, yes, we wouldn't only have a Barbadian in the family because my mother's Guyanese, my father's Vincentian, but we would have a prime minister so that when we go through the airport, that customs will not stop us and question us. But then last year, and the year before when this person was campaigning, and the year before that, they said that they wanted to lead the opposition and they did so. And I said, nonetheless, I will get there. and I will get there before that person. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not my great pleasure to say it. And I would not do like Marie and say, you are not the father. But I will say, I am not the first female Prime Minister of Barbados. But it is a goal. It is one that I will someday achieve. So what I will do is just learn from her pros and cons in this process, and I will become the best female Prime Minister of Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a woman who needs no introduction, no bio. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Honorable Maya Amor Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for your Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, Maya Amor Mottley.
I'm going to try to be like her. Good afternoon, Barbados. I may be the first, but I've come to tell you that I'm not the last, and I hope that I will never be the best. And in a very real sense, it is as if you went in my head to ask me what I was coming to speak to you on this wonderful day of the workers' May Day. Because I've come really to complete a process. This is my first May Day as Prime Minister of Barbados, and I am deeply humbled, truly, to be here. But I've come to speak in a very reflective tone because I want us to leave here with one thought in our heads, that we must continue to do better in order to be the best. And it is against that background, I have no difficulty in being the person who tries to do better so that you one day may be the best female Prime Minister. But it isn't only you and me that I want to do better. It is a country that is made up of people. And the majority of us are workers. And I am pleased more than anything else to be associated with a political movement, because it isn't only a party, but a political movement that was spawned in the Caribbean 80 years ago, 81 years ago, that gave birth to the collective framework that saw people come together to represent themselves in every respect, and the most important of which for the average worker was as a union. And that this could be done, General Secretary, less than 20 years after the formation of the International Labour Organization, shows that on this small rock, from this small place, we have been in the vanguard of the improvement of the rights of workers and fighting always for decent work and for rights to be accorded to our people, because we know that each and every one of us was created in the image of God, and each and every one of us has to have the dignity and the agency of an individual that must be respected by all. That Grantley Adams could have been there with other men, and I dare say women, even though history does not record the women who worked with them at that point. That Sir Hugh Springer, that Frank Walcott, that these men could have laid the foundation for the first 50 years of this great organization, the Barbados Workers Union, is perhaps one of the strongest platforms on which we could have stood as a people as we emerge from the bowels of colonialism and the bowels of exploitation as a people. And I know that there is very much an attitude of celebration today as we celebrate Workers' Day. But I have come here today not only to celebrate, but to remind us that we have to give thanks. And we have to remember what causes us to be in this space at this time, in this moment today. And as we do so, we recognize that there are some key lessons that remain unchangeable, immutable. The power that we must find in ourselves, the courage that we must look for in each and every one of our bosoms, whether as a worker or whether as a leader, whether as a unionist or whether as a supervisor or manager, whether as a politician or as a constituent. We have to come to grips with the reality that there is power in each and every one of us. And if that power is not used and not nurtured, it will not be of any use to anybody. We have to come to grips with the fact that we have to speak truth to power. And I am the first to tell you and to tell everyone that I don't want a bunch of yes people around me. Never have. And I think that your General Secretary, who speaks her mind frankly, as well as some of the others that I see in this audience representing the labor movement, that the ability to speak honestly, truthfully, but respectfully, honestly and truthfully, but respectfully, must always be the hallmark of the building of our social partnership in this country. And I go further, that the ability to temper the exercise of power, recognizing that the blatant and raw display of power only diminishes power and diminishes the person so exercising it. And it is against that background that perhaps the best example of that in the history of the modern history of this country, outside of the class of political leaders, has been the leaders of the union movement. And to Sir Frank Walcott, and to Sir Grantley Adams, and to Sir Hugh Springer, we add, of course, Sir Roy Trotman, who also understood and learned from them that the greatest display of power comes not through the raw exercise of it, but the use of that power to influence, to nudge, and to be able to create the outcome that is in the interest of all on a sustainable basis. And I have every confidence that your General Secretary, standing as she does, as the first woman but the fourth General Secretary of this great movement, appreciates that power. I will share with you my full appreciation of it, which is not just as a student reading a book of history, but I remember as a young girl speaking to Sir Hugh Springer, who was at the center of the discussions behind the scenes with the then major problems that there were, that the workers' union was going through in the early 1980s. And I can remember it like if it was yesterday. I was a teenager, and he said to me that Barbados will never appreciate the genius of the man called Frank Walcott, who understood that his greatest contribution to the development of workers was to the development and stability of the country Barbados. Because if the country was stable and if the country was developed, then the country would carry the workers along, because we were a fair people and a people who respected social justice. My people have never forgotten it. And I have seen others come and act in similar vein. I've seen the example of Sir Roy Trotman in the early 1990s when this country was put on its knees, and when, in a choice as to how we rebuild, Sir Roy chose to be able to do so in a balanced way, recognizing that without country, the workers have nothing. But that at the same time, that you must never forget who made the sacrifice to stabilize the country. I have seen it now in living color with those who constitute the social partnership. And I made a commitment, and it is one from which my government will never resile, that the basis of the best governance that we can bring to our people is to work together and to work collectively. I have heard you, young man. And it is against that background that I ask you to judge my government not by our words alone, but by our actions. Because on the very first morning after being swearing in a government and a cabinet at Bay Street, the very first meeting of this government was with the Social Partnership of Barbados, because we recognize that labor and capital and the government and the executive must work collectively to take us out of the bowels from which we were languishing after a decade, a lost decade in this country. But it wasn't, and it has not only been about meeting once or twice or three times for the sake of it. Every major decision, whether it is in the context of national security, whether it is in the context of the growth and development opportunities for this country that I will share with the country by the end of the month in greater detail, whether it is in the context of the difficult moments and decisions, like when we had to continue to work out how we are going to balance the adjustment, it has been a joint decision. And these words would seem to be words to those who have an agenda that is contrary to the growth and development of this country. But I've come here today to defend the social partners because it seems as though, for some, patriotism is now to be abused. And it seems for some that the ability to put the country's interests first, to determine that the most important task that every Barbadian faced less than a year ago was to save our dollar, to save our quality of life. It seems as though that is now to be trivialized, and that persons who acted in pursuit of that noble cause are now to be humiliated and to be viewed as lackeys or pawns, rather than to be viewed in the light of the legacy of Hugh Springer, Grantley Adams, Sir Roy Trotman, Patrick Frost, and others. We have a proud legacy. And it is not everything that we will agree upon. And I have every expectation that I might get a lash or two from your General Secretary today. Because to be the best, we must continue to do what? To do better. But doing better isn't only about workers, it's also about the government. It's also about us as individuals. And I say more and more to Barbadians that we can be the best that we can be when we don't see our effort and we don't see our speech only in the context of politics or work or church, but see it as part and parcel of a development process about who we are as people. That was the genius of Errol Barrow's mirror image speech. That was the promise of Grant Lee Adams's efforts to link together not just the political rights, but also the human and social rights, to be able to allow families across this country to be treated in a dignified way. How much more offsetting can it be than for somebody to determine that if you had to borrow money from them, that they should take back all that money from you in 2 or 3 weeks, and you must suck salt and don't eat food. And that's what he changed when he passed the legislation that stopped people in this country in the early 1950s from taking out of your salary more money than they could and than you would need in order to be able to live and to feed your family in this country. That's what he dealt with when he recognized that this body called the human body needs rest. The Bible told you that you need rest. But there are some people who believe that in the pursuit of profit, that they are to work people beyond the capacity. And I say so for fear that my cabinet might get upset with me. But their work is not the kind of work I'm talking about. But there was a time when people did not even know what it was to take a day off or to take a holiday year after year after year. And sometimes I'm saddened because I say to those of you who are here and to those who are not here but who are hearing my voice, have you told your children and your grandchildren how they have gotten where they have gotten? How they enjoy, Remy, what you enjoy today? Have you told them that they have not just landed so without people coming and exhibiting courage and the ability to speak truth to power and the ability to bear the brunt of sacrifice in order to stand for principle? Because principles, as you hear me say over and over, only mean something when it is inconvenient to stand by them. I have come to you today to tell you that this is a long walk. Yes, it is. And it seems to be an appropriate phrase having been used by all in the last week. It's a long journey. Don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. But a long journey does not stop you from remaining focused. And it is for that reason that on the first day, less than 1 week after we won, I said, and to those who believe that this is an IMF program, that is a lot of gobbledygook. It is a lot of nonsense. Because we determined that we were going to craft the program that best suited the people of Barbados and what we could bear. And I say to you, my dear, that just as you intend to learn from us, we learned from those who went before. And we learned that the adjustments in 1974 to 76 and the adjustments in 1981 to 82 and the adjustments in 1990 and 91 were all on the backs of the workers. You, each and every one of you. And if the truth be told, for 18 months I gathered an economic team in the opposition office. And week by week by week by week, we crafted a program. We didn't have any conversation with the IMF, but we crafted a program recognizing that yes, we could not absolve all of the workers from pain, because the depth to which the country had sunk was way too deep. If you are a bad diabetic and you don't take care of the wound on your foot or your hand or whatever for a while, what happens? You run a risk not sometimes only of losing the digit or the limb. You run a risk of sepsis. And if you go back into your archives media, you will find that I gave this speech over and over and over and over in the last 4 or 5 years, recognizing that the hole to which we had jumped in was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and nobody was stopping it. And many of you in the workers' movement and across the private sector would shake your heads. Many a speech from this platform on a May Day spoke to that reality, so that we knew that the condition would be involving some pain. But it was our duty to minimize the pain and to be able to allow persons to recover as quickly as possible. And having learned from the examples of Saroy and others before him, we determined that this adjustment this time had to be borne not just by the workers, but by others who were as much a part of the crisis being created as anybody else. The banks and the insurance companies had made billions of dollars, combined over $3 billion in profits over the course of that 10-year period when the country started to flip. They were not called upon, Clyde, in 1991 when you were there. They were not called upon in 1981 to 82 to share in the burden. They were not called upon previously. But this government, and this Barbados Labour Party government in particular, conscious of the legacy of Grantley Adams, conscious of the shoulders upon which we stand, determined that I would not know how to look at you and to ask you to carry the burden for people who felt it was possible to continue to lend money to a government that was spending it like how a crack addict uses coke. You become complicit. And all of us know that if you see a paro in the community and you see somebody feeding that paro, you believe that that person feeding the paro is as guilty as the paro themselves, not just for the act of addiction, but for the consequences of that addiction with respect to stealing from people and abusing people in the homes in which they live. This is real talk today because this is a real day for real workers. Tony, I come in. But I could not let this day pass because you have a duty to go home, each and every one of you, and to tell your children, your grandchildren, your nephews, your nieces, it's not only about coming out in the thousands to Buju. I am on the front line like you in Buju, but I am on the front line here with workers' rights too. And a people that loses their memory, that doesn't understand how they got where they have gotten, are a people who are at risk of being exploited and being used against their will. So I have come here today to tell you that let those who want to talk, talk. Just as you are interested in the country's stability and development, and work as partners, all of you that I see in this audience, as partners not in a political party, but for a political movement in the post-independence Caribbean that says that those people who have been the hewers of wood and the drawers of water and those who have been exploited by political systems not crafted in our part of the world, that the days for that are over. And whether it is BLP, DLP, GLP, KLP, or any other LP that come about, and I hear one might be coming, whether it is any of us, we have a solemn duty not just to allow you to have decent work, but to allow you to be the owners of capital as well, to be enfranchised. And that's what Frank Walcott and Grantley Adams and Hugh Springer fought for as well. Not just for decent work, but you should be able to save and you should be able to participate in the benefits in this economy. And I believe that in the same way we have come to do better, to be the best, with respect to not carrying and allowing you to carry the brunt of the adjustment, that we have come also to do and to work with you to educate our people in financial literacy, to allow our people to know that cash earned mustn't just be frittered away, that cash earned must be invested, so that the same people who could build this house, and even when they sell it, the family and the estate benefit from the value. The same people who can build enterprises. I don't believe that people started big. I am not too old or too young. I remember a lot of things. I remember when Kiffin Simpson had a car sales room. It wasn't in Warren's when I was a child. It was short there on this road. He didn't start big. I remember when men like Leo Leacock were being built up in this country. He started as a messenger. And look where he was able to amass wealth and to leave to his two sons, both of whom are in the financial services sector and in the construction industry. And I can go on and name names, but I don't want to do that because I want you to leave here tonight, brethren and sistren, with an understanding that no matter how much I want it, or the cabinet want it, or the general secretary want it, it can't happen alone. And this notion that you can respect enjoyment but don't respect the things that make you powerful is something that we have to change in this country. We have to understand that life is about balance. And the balance comes in our ability to retrain and empower, to retool and enfranchise. That's what the RERE program is going to be about. Because you know it and I know it, we have allowed our slip to show a little too much in this country. And we've allowed it to show from the level of institutions, to the level of the private sector, to the unions even, to the workers even, and to the political parties as well. You're not perfect. And I don't get upset when people criticize. I use the criticism to make me better and to inspire the government to become better. And it is against that background that while we have done so many wonderful things, don't get me wrong, tell me how many other countries going into an IMF program gave the workers a 5% increase across the board as public servants. Tell me how many other countries took pensioners, non-contributory pensioners at the bottom of the scale and gave them a 45% increase on the eve of an IMF program when others said you couldn't do it. Clyde? me how many other countries on the eve of an IMF program said that we are going to take our young people. Look at some of them in here today, bright, brimming with promise, and that they must have the right to go to the community college or the polytechnic or the university if they want to go, that they should not be denied by the circumstances of their birth. Tell me how many other countries on the eve of an IMF program said that in the same way we can waive taxes for people from overseas, we can take $10 million a year and put it in a trust loan program to lend ordinary Bajans $500, $1,500, $5,000. Tell me how many other countries on the eve of an IMF program had to do all of that and still have to contend to go and look to buy buses that had not been bought. Not one. Not a single one in 10 years. Not 10 months. 10 years. Or garbage trucks. 10 years. I say to you, my friends, that this is not an exam. It's life. And life, we do some things very well, and we need to do some things better. And I have come here today to tell you as workers that I hear you. And I feel the pain. Because many of you will be compromised if we don't get the public transport situation corrected. And we intend to do so. Yesterday, the chairman resigned and I accepted it through my minister. I have asked Ian Goodinedgell, who is a former chairman of the Transport Board, and who is more than capable of meeting the obligations and the task of chairman, to do and to accept that position, and he has agreed. And I expect, therefore, that he will work with the board with immediate haste to help correct this unfortunate situation. But I want to remind us that we didn't get there so, and that any government that presided over, according to them, in 2008, September, they had over 250 buses. And we inherited just over 50 buses working. But at the same time, we saw the number of privately owned permits in this country move from 500 to 750. And in the meantime, you at the Workers' Union would know that your debt at UCAL went from next skin to nothing to over $20 million at the same time that there were less buses and more buses to be repaired and more debt knocking about the place. We are more than capable of solving these problems. And I have asked the board and the new chairman, along with the chairman and board of the Transport Authority, to work route by route by route by route with the public and private resources, because our obligation is to make sure that buses run to time, buses run to route, and that we help those who need the most help as they go forward in paying the bus fares. We heard you, and we provided the discounts that would give you the opportunity on a volume basis to go back from $3.50 to $3. We heard you, and we also recognize that we need to make sure that children going on the ZRs and the other privately owned minibuses could pay $2.50 because the government does not pay to them unless they are going to come into the transport augmented program. But we've gone further. And in addition to the 40 or so buses that have now, and privately owned transport vehicles or so, that are now coming into the program, we are going to go route by route by route to see how best to mobilize and to utilize those buses to provide that affordable, reliable transport that Barbadian workers and people deserve and will get under my government. And we will also, recognizing that we don't have the luxury of being able to increase our debt as a government to buy buses, we will also work with the privately owned people who come into the Transport Augmented Program, the TAP program, by giving you duty-free access to buses, even though you will have to pay the VAT with respect to them. So you will not pay the import duties so long as you work with the Transport Board in order to be able to deliver that transport system. And what does that private person get, therefore? They get the benefit of a duty-free bus, because not only has the government not renewed its fleet, but the majority of those privately owned ones who are coming into our program would not have renewed their fleet. They get the benefit of the Transport Board paying for the fares of pensioners, paying for the fares of school children, and paying for the fares of policemen in uniform. And they, by extension, will pay a small percentage to the Transport Board to run as a Transport Board designated bus as we go forward. We believe that this is workable. And while it will take time to roll out across the entire country, because even in the purchase of new buses, there is no part of the world you can go and sit down and buy 20 or 30 buses, because they are made to order in today's world. People don't keep stock. And it is against that background, therefore, my government will work to do better, to make sure that you, the workers, are in a better situation when we meet next year this time with respect to the delivery of reliable, affordable public transport in Barbados. But there are other things that we need to do, and I will not keep you much longer. But workers have to recognize, as well as managers of capital, that if we don't change how we do business in a world that is fueled by technology, we are going to be left behind. And I look forward, therefore, to speaking at the International Labour Organization later this year, and also to pay tribute to Sir Roy Trotman as we do that, as they celebrate their centenary anniversary. Because they, like us, recognize that this thing called technology is changing how all of us function in the world, and is making some jobs redundant and some jobs obsolete. And it is against that background that we have to repurpose and re-engineer what we do. You can't wait for the event to end up on you and then say, oh shoot, what are we going to do with the people? We have to work it out and plan and retrain and retrain and retrain. So when I say to you that the whole of Barbados becomes a university and a training campus for the next 4 years, believe you me, but the social partnership has gone one step further. And we have asked for 2 papers, both of which we have, the early ones, and now they're strengthening in certain respects. One on the structure of work in Barbados, both in the public and private sector, and 2, one on pensions, because unless we get this issue of pensions right, we stand to not only affect workers, but affect the capacity of the state to be able to sustain what its obligations are to your young children as they become older. And we don't intend for them to be put at risk in this country. So over the course of the next 12 months, my government will work with the social partners to settle on the appropriate compact and legislation to deal with the structure of work. Some of you should not have to say that you want a sick day or that you want a vacation day to do something that is family driven. You should be able to have lieu days. And you should be able to have up to 5 lieu days in this country. Because as human beings, we all have obligations to ourselves and to our family that go beyond sickness, that go beyond the rest that you need, that Grantley fought for you. Similarly, my government has announced, and I'm waiting for the National Insurance Scheme to do it, that we will give paternity leave starting with 2 weeks to men in this country. Because we understand the importance of men bonding with their children. But we also understand that there has to be discipline in how the paternity leave is managed. Enough said at this moment. So my friends, I want to wish all of you a happy Workers' Day. But I want you to leave here not only committed to be doing better so that we can be the best that we can be. The message doesn't really change. And when I said it to the little children at St. Stephen's Infants, or on Monday, as I wore, this is my Heroes' Day, Workers' Day flag. I use it as a scarf and a flag. But what I said to the little 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It has to be the motto not just of little children. It has to be the motto of managers. It has to be the motto of workers. It has to be the motto of leaders. It has to be the motto of families. And secondly, many hands make light work. I keep saying, what lies ahead of us cannot be achieved by 1 or 2 alone. But young man, as you said at the end of your speech, collectively, together, we can move mountains. Together, we can become the best that we can be. But when we have some here and some there and some everywhere, we don't get there. And in the spirit of the union movement, and in the spirit of the conquest of workers against centuries of exploitation, against centuries of humiliation, workers only in the last 100 years became the most powerful that they could be across this world because they stood how? United. And they didn't stand united only within their own union. They stood united across unions. Because it is only in being able to have that unity of purpose, to accept that help is needed to fight large battles, to accept that working together as one, we can move mountains and remain faithful to the purpose that we can simply do better always to be the best that we can be. God bless you, the workers of this country. God bless Barbados, and may our journey continue. It is long, but it is ours to conquer. God bless you.
I heard somebody said amen. And as soon as I got to the podium, I also hear, that's right, Prime Minister. I wasn't sure if they meant the Prime Minister or if they meant the Prime Minister. And I thank those who went before the Barbados Workers Union Youth Arm President Akil Aline and the Honorable Mayor Amor Mottley for their words. And they both also alluded to the words of sociologist Emil Durkheim, where he says that society or communities, it functions like a living organ, and that if one part of that organ is dysfunctional, then the entire society or community then becomes dysfunctional. So it goes to say, just like our body, where every part needs to function for it to be healthy, the same goes for our communities. So I hope that we remember those words and that we are encouraged in working together for the betterment of our society, not only within Barbados or the Caribbean, but on an international forum as well. I remember 2 years ago, I was searching for a job, and I believe that it's fitting now that we're on the topic of youth and growth within our communities, growth within our economies, growth within our countries. And as a young person, you know it is hard to find work, and everywhere you go it says that you must have experience, and we always say, well, you can only get the experience if it's given to you. And there was a lady who was teaching me in a course that I was doing called Social Development and Social Policy. And this lady, I always looked up to her. I saw her as a mentor, somebody that I believe young women should really take a leaf out of her book. One who is strong, one who is submissive to her husband, I may dare say. One who is a believer of God, but one who stands up for rights, not only for workers, but women within our community. And I always say that one day I wish that I can come close to that young lady. One day I wish somebody could go on stage and perform a calypso song and say, "You are Shakita the Tigress." But nonetheless, this lady is also known as Tony the Tigress. One that, when she speaks at a podium as great as this one that has the Barbados Workers Union logo on it, and I always mention that organization when I speak of greatness, who, when she speaks, people salivate to the words that she has to say. This is a lady of vigor, one that the word of God says that would add zest and salt and purpose to the earth, that it may flourish and flourish abundantly. And as I introduce you to her, I want to say that this is one who gave me an opportunity to work at the Barbados Workers Union, who have given me the opportunity to flourish, who have given me the opportunity to stand before you and say, "Good evening, Barbados." Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a warm welcome to the great Senator Toni Moore, first female General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, one of the greatest women in the International Labor Organization in the international spectrum. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Senator Toni Moore.
I pay her for that. Good afternoon, BW family. Good afternoon, BWU family. I could tell in a secret. Prime Minister assured me she was speaking 7 minutes. So I kind of time it so that the sun will be beaten down in this direction, encourage the guys to bring forward the podium so that she would stick to the 7 minutes. And for 27 of her 37 minutes, the sun was under a cloud. Let me start by saying a happy May Day to all of you. Today is an important celebration not only in the lives and work of workers in Barbados, but also across the rest of the world. But for the BWU, this year's celebration is fused with a number of different emotions. We celebrate, of course, with a sense of nostalgia. Yet we recognize that there are many who feel that they can't celebrate the day for workers. There are many who feel that they can't celebrate work because they're so consumed with worry over where they are today, their present circumstances, and over what the future might hold for them. We're celebrating workers and work and the value of work at a time when too many workers have suffered dislocation. Too many workers have suffered dislocation from their work and the indignity of no work. I say indignity because May Day is a day, a time for labor to celebrate the dignity of work. And as we were reminded by the Right Reverend Michael Maxwell on Sunday at our Thanksgiving service, May Day is the time that every posse shall be celebrating the ability to work. Their right, his right, her right to assert the rightful place as a contributor to our nation's development. May Day is about valuing the masses and their contributions. It is not a day for paying tribute necessarily to one person or to 10 persons, even where these are properly designated as heroes. May Day is a day which is about all of us. So I share with our Prime Minister the concern that more of you, more of your peers do not understand the significance and the importance not of just taking a day off, but collectively celebrating their work. Of course, there will always be some whose contributions stand out and who will be recognized. But May Day, the day for all of we, is a day that I don't have to convince this government about its importance, because we've heard from the highest level in the cabinet that May Day is here to stay. You heard that? I heard that. So if you are valuing the fact, if you like the fact that May Day isn't one of those holidays you gotta worry about, let me hear a big shout out. That sound poor, it can't pop down. If you are happy to hear that May Day is one of those holidays that we don't have to worry about, notwithstanding the employers who are counting the productivity losses at a time when they should be considering how they should be valuing you. If you are happy to hear that we don't have to worry about May Day, let me hear you. That's sounding a little better. Today marks the 60th May Day celebration on May 1st. 60th. And some of you are doing the math, because the Barbados Workers Union has been around for 77 years. But from 1946, Labor Day was celebrated in October in Barbados. It was only in 1959 that we started the celebration of May Day on May 1st. Of course, Prime Minister was interrupted for a year or two by a BLP administration that had to respond to the workers' protest for May Day on May 1st, and it was restored. As we celebrate this year's May Day, the BWU holds no expectations that the economic challenges of 2019 will be less daunting than those previously faced in the periods of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, as we've heard. But the Executive Council understands that if we are to overcome the current challenges and translate obstacles into opportunities, there is a need for revival and a new burst of energy to achieve that revival. And hence our theme for this year, Revive, Re-Energize. In addressing you under this May Day theme, or let me call it our family devotion, we'll give particular emphasis to the first two letters of those words, revive, re-energize. Two letters, R-E, re. The prefix that means again, anew, back. In many respects, we need to get back on track. We need to get back on track as a country, as an economy, as a society, as a people, as a union, as a Barbados Workers Union. We need to feel pride again. We need to have a new view of ourselves, our contributions, our strength. So the first re that I want us to consider is reflect. May Day is always a good time to reflect on the toils and contributions of those on whose shoulders we stand. The likes of Bussa, Clement Payne, Charles Duncan O'Neill, Hugh Springer, Grantley Adams, Frank Walcott, Saroy Frotman, Patrick Frost, John Cumberbatch, Horatio Cook, and many others. May Day is the time that we remember those who've gone before. As we reflect, we are challenged to remember what made their contributions stand out. It wasn't only their commitment to worker enfranchisement. It wasn't only their grit. It wasn't only their determination. But it was the fact that they also had followers who shared the vision. Followers who shared the passion and who had the mind to work in fulfillment of the vision. We ought to also use this time, as we were reminded in our May Day Thanksgiving service, to reflect on our biblical teachings, to be inspired by the likes of Nehemiah, who led a people to rebuild the walls of a city, not only because he was a good leader, but because the people had a mind to work. We also need to consider another remember. We need to remember that the struggle of labor has never been an easy one. And as we remember this, we are encouraged because in the same way that we have risen above those struggles again and again, in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, we can do it again. We need to remember too that the positive strides made by labor, by our labor leaders on behalf of workers, occurred not only because they had the power of the people behind them. Of course, that power made them formidable adversaries to oppose. But they also asserted themselves through the use of political power to make advances on behalf of the masses. We may recall that the Barbados Workers' Union was born out of the Barbados Progressive League, that our first president and general secretary were also the founders of that league. We would remember that the Right Excellent Sir Frank Walcott was Member of Parliament for St. Peter, Colin. He was a senator and a president of the Senate for 6 years from 1986 to 1992. We will remember that Sir Roy Trotman was a Member of Parliament representing the people of St. Michael Central as a member of the Democratic Labour Party. And after his resignation from that party, and he's looking at me from up high, he became an independent senator, a position of service I now hold. Now, the biggest irony, perhaps, is that the current General Secretary, who has no official affiliation to a party, is being accused by some of being an underminer of the workers' fight for enfranchisement. You hear it? Have you been hearing it? Because I hear a bit of it. Perhaps today, although the Prime Minister has said let them talk and don't respond to talk, perhaps I should settle a score with those of you who may hold that view, and those others who would wish to convince the others of you that such a view has merit. Not because I don't understand the desperation of those who advance such positions, but because if we don't recall and remember past contributions, if we don't recall and remember the way things were done, it may warp our understanding of the way things are being done. Sir Frank and Sir Roy worked with the Democratic Labour Party at a time where the lines dividing those two political parties were very blurred. The philosophies, the philosophical underpinnings were pretty much the same. For most of the union's existence, our leaders, except for our founding leaders, our other leaders, Sir Frank, Sir Roy, and members of our Executive Council, were affiliated to the Democratic Labour Party. During that period, whether they were the party in power or the party in opposition, advances were made on behalf of the people that they represented. This General Secretary, the current one who you hear about, is the first female General Secretary, took over at a point where the party in government had degenerated to a party which betrayed its rich history and the legacy of its forerunners. I therefore offer no apology for not joining forces with them. Under their leadership, labor has come through one of the most depressed and depressing periods of labor relations in Barbados. a period that would perhaps make past labor leaders of that party roll over in their graves. So like the majority of you, I exercise my right to vote, but not in support of that kind of leadership. That does not make me a paling cock. When we were doing some visits on Heroes Day, I went to the Gordon Cummins Geriatric Hospital, and I was encouraged by one of our former members, Cleveland Ellis. He's now blind. Told me he joined the union back in 1984, and he challenged me to stand up and keep standing for workers. Keep demonstrating that heart for workers. Another one was telling me you not only have a big heart, but you have a broad back to do what you are doing. And as he echoed those words, Comrade Ellis said, you will have the party you support. Fight for workers vigorously. Don't be a paling cock. And if he's listening, as I told him to listen today, I assure him and others of you that I'm not a paling cock, a yard fowl, or I'm not a cellar duck. You remember all the terms? I encourage you and I assure you that this fight for enfranchisement is not undermined by me. The fact that I voted against a government that was undermining our own development certifies me as one who is leading this organization, who is committed to work with those who will work with us, but who on the individual level will withhold support from anyone and any team which does not advance the cause of workers. Now, this Prime Minister doesn't need me on her team. She doesn't need me on her team to win or to maintain support. She doesn't even need to spend time tickling my belly to make me laugh, because she has been given a tremendous mandate. And even after almost a year in power, and after presiding over debt restructuring, increased taxes, extensive retrenchment in the public sector, that's the one I will not talk about, she still can get a following of at least 50 times what I see and hear down Barclays Park on Monday. Y'all clapping for that, you should be shamed. A few months ago, Akil, the president of the youth farm, who you heard speak a while ago, Akil came to me a Friday evening out of concern for the way things were going, and he said, GS, you realize that people get sent home and the union getting blamed for it? Do you remember that, Akil? The Prime Minister doesn't need me, but Madam Prime Minister, revive and re-energize requires the commitment of the workers who are represented by the BWU, the National Union of Public Workers, the BSTU, the BUT, and other staff associations. And this brings me to the next relationship. There are many of our members, but more so our critics, who would challenge us that we are eaten out of the hands of government, that we are going too far in partnering, that we are selling out workers. We are selling out workers for government's benefit. The last criticism, to borrow a word from Saroy, will be laughable if it wasn't so heart-rending. Only an ignoramus could think that job losses which threaten labor prospects for growth and sustainability would be a welcome. Only a moron would consider that unemployment which threatens our welfare and social security systems would be a benefit to this union. How would it be a benefit to this General Secretary to be recorded not only as the first female General Secretary, and therefore the prettiest, but the General Secretary who will go down in the annals of history as breaking down a dynasty, the dynasty called the Barbados Workers' Union? How would it be a benefit to our legacy, to our nation? Comrades, I urge you that we have come too far to submit to naysayers. We have come too far to submit to dim-witted thinking. 2 years ago, I was one of those leaders in the social partnership, appealing to a government that would not engage for a chance to help shape the future for Barbados. At a time where their efforts to go it alone were failing them and failing all of us. Where we were in a downward spiral, which was crushing us all. But today, our partnership is resuscitated. Another re. Today we are presented with yet another opportunity to build on what Barbados had achieved in its post-independence in the area of worker and employer relations. And to ask you again today, as we did at May Day 2010, if not this way, if not the way of partnership, then which way? May Day is a time for us to confront the relationship question bluntly. I often wonder why it is that if as a people we ain't getting it rough, we don't seem to appreciate the ride. I can't speak for you, but for me, the smoother the ride, the happier I am with the vehicle, and not only the vehicle, but the driver. Hope you don't see my husband blushing anywhere. We must disabuse ourselves of the view that the soft use of power, or the use of soft power, however people would want to see it, is ineffective, and that it results in selling out. We must be enlightened that the achievements and contributions made by the labor movement were not mainly by the sword and by open hostility. Although such may become necessary when our voices are not being received and responded to. Such may become necessary when you're talking to a person and they ain't saying nothing. Unfortunately, for most of my time as General Secretary, that has been the experience. I say unfortunate, but perhaps in retrospect, I was fortunate, because here enters my challenge. I am now able, on your behalf, to engage a Prime Minister that respects our leaders enough to, in the first place, listen to them, to respond, and to move to correct missteps. Therein lies the problem, because unless we see a fight, we can't appreciate the victory. Unless we see a fight, we can't appreciate the outcome of a fight. So relationship has me looking soft. But as the workers of the Transport Board, who after more than a decade of asking have now received the assurance of a gratuity, as the clerical officers in customs, who at last have been correctly designated as customs officers, as the workers of UCAL, who, although we are in the economic situation we are in, are finally seeing money flowing their way and finally able to regain confidence in the government and in their union, that a model of worker enfranchisement might actually make sense. Prime Minister, I am under pressure to have an open fight with you so I don't look soft. But then if I do that, I undermine relationship and social partnership. Perhaps the most suspicion about the quality of labor's relationship with the government right now comes when decisions and commitments made by you are left to little Hitlers. I'll borrow that word from Sir Frank. Little Hitlers who refuse to follow through on the decisions in the implementation phase. So true is that statement that even now there is a clip going around on social media from former or retrenched workers of MTW calling for their gratuities when the issue of their gratuities has been settled already. Also true is the fact that there are people in strategic positions in the public sector who, through no fault of their own, have been catapulted into positions way above the level of their competence. So the retraining you spoke about, Prime Minister, in the RERE program must target these first. I know that already you have undertaken with us to revisit the qualifications order to ensure that we broaden the net of people who are able to compete for jobs. And so that because you're a cook and you don't have a qualification from BCC, but you have years of experience and you have vocational skills, that you are not denied the opportunity to even bid for a job. But that is for going forward. We must move quickly now to re-equip current holders of positions across all levels of the public sector to achieve the objectives of growth and productivity development which have been identified. But at the level of your cabinet too, there is a cause for concern. It would appear that some members of cabinet, members of parliament, almost all of them in the cabinet, it would appear that some are not managing. That might not be the case, but I'm speaking about how it appears. And it is not my intention to point fingers, nor would this be the occasion for testimony service. But staying the course will require more than just the commitment of the Prime Minister and a few. Prime Minister, you have been recorded countless times, and you said it towards the end of your speech here today, that many hands make light work. This is true in many cases and would gain greater acceptability for all of us where the evidence is plain for everybody to see, and so there can be no challenge. On this May Day, I urge you, as you approach 1 year in office, to use this anniversary wisely and to use it or seize it as an opportunity with which you can present the people with a report card on all line ministries. Now, at the end of a school year, when you do your end of term exams, you bring home a report. And how often I recall shuddering to think that there might be a red, all caps word at the top that says not promoted, 2 words, not promoted. I urge you, Prime Minister, to offer the people of Barbados, not only the workers of Barbados, present the people of Barbados with a report card. A report card of what cabinet ministers are doing. Let us determine if they should be promoted or whether they should stop down. The union did not jump on the bandwagon with others from day one in suggesting that the cabinet was too large, because we understood that you had a large mandate. But staying the course, just like revive and re-energize, requires a regular boost of confidence. Prime Minister has maintained a so-called Mandela New Testament approach that says forgive people even when they've held you captive and caused you near death over too many years. I believe that where there's evidence of suffering that we must now endure, even as there is a commitment to making life better for us, I believe, and the BW believes, and this is not the first time we're telling you, we've said it in social partnership meetings, that wrong deeds should not go unpunished. We shouldn't leave it for other jurisdictions to do. If the crimes are committed here, the time should be spent here. We are not going to let up in this regard, but an annual report card of the current cabinet would help us to detect if or when any in the present group slip up, if or when they need to be brought back on track, or if they need to be expelled from school. I look forward to celebrating with you the achievements in all assessment areas of those report cards. Promise you I'm not going 37 minutes, I'm soon wrapping up. But I wish to challenge employers in the private sector. I wish to challenge employers that they must not seek to translate this country's misfortune and labor's vulnerability to their benefit. We therefore reiterate to private sector employers that public sector retrenchment shall not be received by us as a signal that you keep workers under siege and seemingly desperate to accept no improvements to their conditions, because as you view it, they ought to be lucky that at least they have a job, because they're workers that were public sector workers who don't have. Not when it is the efforts of the said laborers that has enhanced the financial value brought to your companies. On this very score, I wish to celebrate workers of one of our larger financial institutions in Barbados, who on All Fools Day caused me to feel re-energized and revived by the fact that they openly conveyed to their employer, softly in the first instance, that there were blue vex. So convincing was their fight that it made their colleagues in the Republic of Trinidad blue vex as well, down to their uniforms. All the workers of that financial institution in Barbados and in the Republic of Trinidad wore blue on that day. I would caution that employer, therefore, not to take that as just an April Fool's Day joke. That was a show of solidarity. Because when we roll, we don't roll alone. We move as a family. And the Barbados Workers Union is not just a family in the 166 square miles of Barbados. We have relatives across the Caribbean. Through our affiliations with a number of unions, we have relatives across the globe. I wonder if Sir Frank, if Sir Hugh, if Sir Grantley Adams, if they would have anticipated that the day would come when bank workers would be among the largest divisions of the Barbados Workers Union. I want you all to take a moment to big up our workers at First Caribbean. First Caribbean is now the second largest division of the Barbados Workers Union. I think many of you will be surprised too to know that unionization is across all levels of the financial sector. And we just a few weeks ago welcomed in a new division of workers from First Citizens Managers. Stay in the course, your government's message to the people. Revive, re-energize, the BWU's May Day message will not resonate where our people are feeling bruised and forlorn. On the BERT, people have been retrenched. Many of those were dislocated 6 months ago. Unemployment benefits have been exhausted. How does our message get through to those who have no evidence of the retraining that has been committed to them 6 months ago? When are we going to get the opportunity as social partners to agree to areas of opportunity, to agree to jobs of the future for our youth who need hope? When are we going to be made aware of the progress being made by the mitigation unit, which has been set up as one of the markers of the BERT retrenchment program? Prime Minister, I might even consider joining you, although I said you don't need me. But that could only be where Our journey to measured growth is balanced by evidence that we are keeping faith with our people. At our church service on Sunday, the Minister of Labor threw out an invitation to the Barbados Workers Union to be part of government's plan of retooling, empowering, retraining, and enfranchising. We urge you, Minister, not to confine your contemplation of this union's involvement to training for those who are already working, but to recognize that there is a role for labor, a role for the labor movement in empowering and enfranchising and offering hope to our children and our older teens who are fastly approaching working age. In addition to sports programs that must tackle the challenges of inclusion and discipline in the schools, our young people must be provided with a knowledge of where they have come from. For our history connects us to who we are and what we are about. Our capacity to positively influence young and impressionable minds is key to emancipating our people from mental slavery. Finally, this May Day message is a call for another reconciliation. The increases in violence and the number of deaths due to violence, political divisions, and so on has been exasperated by ignorance and desperation. The ignorance and desperation of those whose political self-interests have caused more hardship than necessary. So that now we can't even see past our differences. We can't even see past our personalities to unite for our own sustainability. These are the telltale signs that revival is necessary. At my first May Day as a staff member of the BWU back in 2004, the government, the workers, and the employers signed a May Day Declaration, May Day Declaration 2004, where we acknowledge before God that Barbados' present stage of development and its future will depend on the effort, dedication, and commitment of Barbadians from all walks of life. And so I take the opportunity to thank all employers in the private sector who have partnered with us today for this celebration. They get it. We have Massey, First Caribbean, Barbados Port Inc., Central Bank, the BTMI, Elegant Hotels, Hilton Hotels, Freaks Customs, Coral Mist, Harson's Cave, Public Workers Credit Union, Social Bank. We even had contributions not from the Transport Board, because them ain't got the money. We had contributions from the General Manager of the Transport Board, the acting General Manager, and from the Minister of Transport in the form of transport cards to help contribute towards prizes for our May Day. I say thanks to our May Day committee as well. Our May Day committee is not comprised of executive council members and staff members alone, but of employers' representatives and workers, some of whom are not even shop stewards, who sacrifice and come year on year to make sure that this day can be celebrated and observed as meaningfully as possible. To our workers, I remind you, our strength, our successes, and our influence continues to count for something. But it is up to us. Let us revive, let us re-energize, let us recommit to the future we want. Yes, it has been rough. It continues to be rough. I've said over the last few months that the only positive thing about Bert is that I have shed a couple pounds. But as we celebrate this Family Day, family in this day is not to be underestimated. As a family, we have a record of the highs and the lows, the mountaintop experiences and the valley experiences, the joys and the sorrows. And as a family, we have learned over a history of 77 years that we must hang tight and gain strength from each other, especially during the rough times. Usually I try to sing at the end of the speech. But I am reserving something for the guest appearance that I'm making in our karaoke competition later. So I will just recall the words of our theme song. Man, even if we fall out, BWU going all out. We would never watch the family them fall and sprawl out. From everywhere we crawl out, we ready to brawl out. Fire burn, my friend, is family. We ball out. That is it, using the Queen's English as much as I could. So let's not fail each other. With God's help and with your commitment, we can and we will do it. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.